Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today's video, we're going to be comparing her physical and cryo-based builds. This video is not going to tell you what her best artifact set or what her best weapon is, because basically Rosaria doesn't really have a best artifact set or weapon because it's going to change completely depending on which role you decide to play her as. Anyone out there that's making a generic artifact or weapon guide out there for her is going to be seriously misleading. So be careful and make sure that they are mentioning all of her different kinds of playstyles. With that said, right now I think there are three main ways that you can play Rosaria as a physical DPS, a cryo DPS, or a sub DPS / burst DPS. This video will not be going into depth about her sub DPS role because I want this video to be condensed as possible and go in depth in just her cryo versus physical builds. She also does have a very much less popular full crit rate support build, and I will not be going over that in this video as well. So the first thing that we need to do is decide how we are going to compare a physical build to a cryo build, because they are mechanically very different builds. Let's quickly go over the build between the cryo and the physical. For the cryo build, we are going to be using double cryo with Chongyun, as well as the 4-piece Blizzard Strayer set. And since we are running 4-piece Blizzard, we are also going to be running crit damage circlet along with a Black Cliff pole. For the physical build, we will use double cryo for the resonance and use superconduct for the physical res debuff. We are also going to be using 2-piece gladiator with 2-piece bloodstain artifact set, and for the weapon, we are using a crescent pike. Since this build has no natural source of crit rate here, we need to use a crit rate circlet, since relying on substats for crit rate is way too RNG based and not many people can achieve that level of luck on crit rate substats. But I will still include a little bit of crit rate in this build. And guys, a very quick note about superconduct. This is going to behave differently depending on the enemy. So for simplicity, I have to limit it to being used against enemies with a 10% physical res. So numbers change a bit when dealing superconducted physical damage to enemies like Minotaurs, Vishaps, and Ruin Guard type enemies. So please keep that in mind. And now as for the substats that I'm going to be using in this build, I'm going to assume that we rolled 4 times into either crit damage or crit rate at the highest tier roll. I think that this is pretty conservative and pretty achievable for most people. This means that 4 crit damage rolls on our cryo build is going to give us an extra 31.2% extra crit damage, and with the physical build, that's going to give us 15.6 extra crit rate. So that means for the cryo build, the 4-piece Blizzard Strayer set is going to give us about 70% crit rate, and the physical build is going to have around 50% crit rate. So with those assumptions, we now need to consider the rate of damage her kit deals. So we need to know what a full combo rotation looks like and determine how each set performs under those same conditions. We need to know how many normal attacks Rosaria can execute within that single rotation. And so the cryo build is limited by the duration of the cryo infusion from Chongyun. His cryo infusion lasts 10 seconds and then has a lingering about 2.5 seconds after it goes away. So we'll use this to determine what one full rotation of Rosaria's combo looks like. Her rotation is going to start off with an E skill to first proc her passive and gain that 12% crit rate. Then it'll go into her Rites of Termination Elemental Burst so that it'll tick damage while we do our normal attack combos. Then it's spam normal attack combos until all of our skills come off of cooldown. If you watched my Rosaria overview video, then you'll know the frame data for her normal attack combo. It takes about 3.8 seconds to complete a full 5-hit string at C0. With an E skill at a 6-second cooldown, that means you'll pop it after 2 5-hit combos, or you might want to opt to cut your combo a little bit short and pop it before your normal attack combo finishes. But again, for simplicity, we'll say that you do a full 5-hit string twice before using your E skill. The cryo build is also limited by the duration of Chongyun's cryo infusion, so as soon as it ends, you should switch off to your other characters and begin another rotation. To maximize the time on this, you'll want to cast Rosaria's E skill, then Elemental Burst, swap back into Chongyun, pop his E skill, then go back into Rosaria and do your normal attack rotation. This means that Rosaria can get a little bit over 2 full 5-hit combos and 2 E skills off during this duration. That was a lot of information, but let me break down this combo. The combo is going to include 1 elemental burst, 1 E skill, 2 normal attack combos, another E skill, 2 normal attack combos, and another E skill. In total, that is 1 elemental burst, 3 E skills, and 4 normal attack combos. So these are the numbers that we are going to be comparing. So let's get into it. So here is a table with all of the damage numbers between both of the builds. With the Cryo build, since we're using Blackcliff Pole, there is a row for each stack that you can get with the weapon. So just by looking at the numbers from the table, it's a little bit hard to parse the information, so I graphed this into some bar charts. This first graph shows us the damage comparisons when we don't look at any kind of rotations. It's just the damage from a single instance of each part of her kit. So you can see the total damage for her Cryo build has a greater total damage output, so we can't just take a look at this chart and make a conclusion from it. So the next chart takes a look at the damage when we include the full rotation that we decided to do our comparisons on, as explained earlier in the video. So this is the damage when we deal 3 instances of our E skill and 4 instances of our normal attack combo, along with the 4 hits from our elemental burst. And you can see here that the physical build is very close in damage to the Cryo build when the Cryo build has no stacks. It actually beats it, and it's only slightly below the Blackcliff Pole Cryo build when we have 1 stack. So in terms of pure damage numbers, and when we just look at 1 single rotation, it does seem like the Cryo build is going to edge out. And it's definitely going to edge out against matchups where there are a lot of enemies, so that we can keep the uptime on the Blackcliff Pole passive. This chart also includes both non-crit damage and crit damage. So let's take a look at a graph that shows just crit damage, because our Blackcliff Pole build is going to have a lot of crit rate from the 4-piece Blizzard set. So this graph right here shows us the damage for only 1 single rotation and when we only deal critical hits. And the picture still stays the same. The Cryo build edges out against the physical build. But guys, remember that numbers and graphs never tell the whole story. We have to think about these builds from a practical point of view. The thing that these charts and numbers don't tell you is how often does her elemental burst come back up. There are tons of variables that go into how fast she can generate elemental particles so she can use her elemental burst again. The more enemies you fight, the faster it's going to come back online. The more Cryo characters you use on the team, the more energy particles you're going to create. If you're only fighting 1 enemy, they are not going to be able to generate enough energy particles for you to get your burst back after 1 single rotation. So what this means is that the physical damage from the physical build is eventually going to catch up to the Cryo build, because the higher physical damage from your normal attacks happens much more often than your Cryo burst damage. Let's take a look at the graph one more time so that we can try to visualize this. This blue area right here represents the damage of Rosaria's normal attacks. You can see that the physical build does significantly more damage than the Cryo build in terms of normal attacks. And so if we're unable to cast Rosaria's elemental burst during each rotation, or even if we happen to position it badly so that it doesn't hit any enemies, then that means we remove this green and yellow damage portions of this graph if we wanted to potentially look at what her damage would look like for a second rotation. So that means in the long run, the physical build might actually outdamage the Cryo build. The physical build is also going to be much easier to play than the Cryo build. The Cryo playstyle will need you to manage your cooldowns very well to achieve the damage that's showcased in these charts and graphs. The Cryo build also has one very glaring weakness, and that's the inability to freeze certain enemies, specifically enemies that carry innate elements like slimes and vishaps. They can infuse themselves with their innate element, making it nearly impossible to freeze them once they do. So, which build is better? The answer to that is that neither is strictly better than the other, because each one carries its own pros and cons. In terms of math, the Cryo build edges out, but in practicality, you might find more success with the physical build. So when you decide whether you want to run Cryo or Physical for Rosaria, you should weigh the pros and cons of each build and make your decision based off of that. Or go with the build that would require the least amount of resources or effort to make. Or also just the one that you think is going to be much more fun. Both of these builds are completely viable, so you shouldn't feel bad if you're choosing one build over the other. Alright guys, that's the end of this video. Let me know down in the comments below how you guys are building your Rosaria. Cryo, Physical, or Sub DPS. Also, if there was something that I missed, or if there was something that you think that I got wrong, please let me know down in the comments, and I'll take a look into it. I hope that you guys learned something with this video, and I hope that it helped you make a decision on how you want to build your Rosaria. If it did, don't forget to hit the thumbs up button, and maybe even subscribe to the channel. Alright guys, until next time, I will see you later. See ya.